At 10:41 p.m., an entire town was moments away from being erased from existence. By sunrise, families, streets, and decades of history had vanished. What remained was an unrecognizable valley and a silence that haunted even the survivors. But the most disturbing part was not the destruction. It was the fact that the warning signs had been recorded for months. So how did a completely preventable tragedy still happen? And why couldn't anyone stop the mountain before it was too late? This is the story of the night Vajont became a tomb. October 9th, 1963, 10:41 in the evening. The air in the Vajont Valley is unnaturally still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and cooling stone. High above the town of Longarone, the massive concrete arc of the Vajont Dam holds back a reservoir of 260 million cubic meters of water. A faint, high-pitched groaning sound vibrates through the limestone bedrock, a sound only the mountain can make. For several weeks, the surface of the mountain, known as Mount Toc, has been shifting, creeping downward by mere millimeters, then centimeters, then inches. Suddenly, the silence is shredded. A massive, tectonic shudder ripples through the slope. It is the sound of an entire mountainside unmooring itself from reality. There is no turning back. Gravity has claimed its prize. In the dark, the earth begins to slide. A silent, terrifying descent that will, in less than 2 minutes, displace every drop of water in the basin and erase the valley floor from the map of the living. Imagine a structural marvel, a dam so thin, so elegant, that it was hailed as the crown jewel of post-war Italian engineering. Now, strip away the accolades and look at the blueprints with the cold eye of a forensic investigator. The Vajont Dam was an architectural anomaly, a double-curved arch wedged into a narrow gorge. It was designed to withstand immense pressure, but its designers ignored the shifting geology of the canyon. The engineers, fueled by an intoxicating mix of mid-century industrial pride and the pressure to deliver results, chose to overlook the ancient, unstable clay layers hidden deep within the belly of Mount Toc. They believed the dam was invincible. They viewed the mountain as a static, unmoving backdrop to their masterpiece. They were wrong. As we peel back the layers of this catastrophe, we find that the disaster was not a matter of chance. It was a slow-motion collision between human vanity and the raw, uncaring physics of the Earth. Months before the collapse, the local inhabitants began to notice strange phenomena. Small tremors rattled their homes. Wells dried up unexpectedly, then overflowed with murky water. The animals, sensing the tectonic pressure, moved to higher ground. Yet, the authorities dismissed these warnings as the superstitious ramblings of mountain folk. In the offices of the Sade Utility Company, the focus remained on the bottom line. They needed to fill the reservoir to capacity to demonstrate the efficiency of their power plant. They raised the water level, testing the limits, oblivious to the fact that they were pushing against a mountain that was already buckling. Each cubic meter of water added to the reservoir acted as a lubricant, seeping into the microscopic fissures of the fragile clay seams under Mount Toc. The geological clock was ticking, and the engineers had set the alarm for destruction. By the early days of October, the mountain was no longer merely shifting, it was waking up. Instruments measuring the displacement of the ground showed a terrifying acceleration. The slope was moving at a rate of 30 centimeters per day. The engineers held emergency meetings, but the momentum of their project was too great to stop. They gambled. They believed they could control the movement by adjusting the water pressure, effectively trying to tame a geological beast with a valve. They were essentially playing a high-stakes game of physics they did not fully understand. The villagers of Longarone went to bed on that fateful night, unaware that they were sleeping in the shadow of a geological trigger. The warning signs were everywhere, marked in the data points on engineers' charts. Yet the human capacity for denial proved to be the most dangerous structural flaw of all. Back to that final moment. The sound grows louder, a screeching chorus of tectonic plates grinding against one another. The entire north side of the mountain, a mass of debris weighing hundreds of millions of tons, breaks loose. It does not tumble like a landslide. It slides as a solid, monolithic block. It hits the reservoir with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs. The water has nowhere to go. It is forced upward, leaping over the crest of the dam in a wave of terrifying proportions. This is not a flood. It is an aerial event. A towering wall of water and debris, hundreds of meters high, crests the dam and plunges into the valley directly toward the unsuspecting towns below. The impact is instantaneous. In the blink of an eye, the town of Longarone is vaporized. The sheer kinetic energy of the water creates a wind blast so violent that it flattens stone buildings, uproots ancient trees, and strips the very soil from the valley floor. There is no time for warning. There is no time for fear. The inhabitants, who mere moments ago were drifting into sleep, are caught in a maelstrom of mud, rock, and torrent. The engineering triumph, the Vajont Dam, remains standing. It is a haunting irony that the structure designed to hold the world back became the instrument of total annihilation. It stands as an empty, defiant shell, a silent witness to the carnage it helped facilitate. In the hours that follow, the world falls into a profound, suffocating silence. The search for survivors yields only heartbreak. There is nothing left to save. The valley, once lush and alive, is now a graveyard of gray silt and twisted iron. As the sun begins to breach the horizon, the first light of dawn reveals the true scale of the devastation. The mountain, now scarred and missing a massive chunk of its face, looks down upon the void it created. The silence is absolute. It is the silence of an entire community erased by an error that was written in ink long before the first stone was moved. The investigators would later find that the disaster was entirely preventable, a failure of oversight, a failure of ethics, and a monumental failure of respect for the forces of nature. The morning light reveals a landscape stripped of history. Where families lived, there is now only the cold, gray debris of the collapse. The dam, still standing, serves as the only monument to the lives lost in the early hours of that morning. It is a hollow victory for the engineers and a tragic testament to the price of hubris. Beneath the silence of that morning, the lesson remains clear. The earth does not negotiate, and history, once written in stone and water, cannot be undone. If you found this investigation into the shadows of history compelling, ensure you stay connected for our next deep dive into the mysteries that define our world. We hold the past under a microscope, and there is always more to uncover. Support our work by clicking the button below, and join us as we continue to reveal the stories that time almost erased. The tragedy of that morning was not merely a mechanical failure. It was a rupture in the social contract between humanity and the environment. When the engineers stood before the Board of Inquiry weeks later, their faces were etched with a weariness that transcended exhaustion. They spoke in the dry, clipped jargon of blueprints and load-bearing capacities, attempting to insulate themselves from the emotional gravity of the void they had left behind. But the data told a different story. It spoke of ignored warnings, of seismic sensors that had been recalibrated to ignore tremors that were deemed statistically insignificant, and of a corporate culture that viewed safety as an overhead cost, rather than a fundamental prerequisite for existence. The dam, which was supposed to be the crowning achievement of regional infrastructure, became the ultimate symbol of institutional blindness. To understand the scope of such a disaster, one must look beyond the immediate casualties. The ecosystem of the valley was fundamentally altered in a matter of minutes. The silt, once a life-giving force for the downstream flora, had become a suffocating blanket, sealing the riverbed and destroying the delicate balance that had flourished for centuries. Biologists who arrived in the wake of the recovery teams noted that the local wildlife had vanished, not just due to the physical force of the water, but due to the sudden, violent erasure of their habitat. The river, once a meandering ribbon of blue, was now a jagged, unnatural scar, forced into a new channel by the massive discharge of concrete and debris. It was a brutal reminder that when we manipulate the natural world at such a colossal scale, we are playing a game with variables that we do not fully comprehend. The investigation uncovered a trail of documentation that read like a slow-motion car crash. Reports recovered from the executive servers showed that concerns regarding the structural integrity of the drainage tunnels had been raised nearly a decade prior. Those reports had been filed away, marked as low priority, and eventually forgotten. It is the insidious nature of incremental risk. One small concession leads to another, until the safety margin is so thin that only a miracle can prevent a catastrophe. In this instance, there was no miracle. The geology of the region, characterized by porous rock and unstable shifts, had been treated as a static variable, a set of numbers that could be balanced against the necessity of creating a reservoir. Nature, however, does not recognize spreadsheets. It recognizes only the laws of physics, and when those laws were ignored, the consequences were absolute. We often look at such events and seek a single scapegoat, a person whose signature on a faulty document allows us to package the grief and store it away. But the reality is far more uncomfortable. The disaster was a collective failure of society.
It was a failure of the public to demand transparency, a failure of regulators to maintain independence from the entities they were tasked with overseeing, and a failure of the human imagination to envision the worst-case scenario. We live in an age of incredible technological advancement, yet we remain deeply susceptible to the ancient flaw of arrogance. We believe that we have mastered the landscape, that we have bent the rivers to our will, and secured the hillsides with steel and mortar. Every time we encounter a disaster of this magnitude, the veneer of that mastery cracks. As we move forward into a future defined by climate instability and increasing pressure on our natural resources, the lessons of this valley are more vital than ever. We are currently engaged in a global engineering project of unprecedented proportions. We are reshaping coastlines, damming rivers, and altering the chemical composition of the atmosphere. The difference between success and failure in these endeavors is not just a matter of technical precision, it is a matter of philosophical humility. We must ask ourselves if we are building for the sake of endurance or for the sake of short-term expansion. The ruins that remain in the valley are a silent classroom, teaching a course that is mandatory for our species to pass if we are to thrive in the coming centuries. Consider the aftermath for the survivors, those who carry the memory of the valley as it was before the roar of the water changed everything. For them, there is no closure in the legal settlements or the public apologies. There is only the daily reminder of what was lost, the photographs in their albums, the stories told at dinner tables, the ghosts of a community that was wiped off the map. These are the true measurements of the cost. When we talk about infrastructure, we are not talking about concrete and steel. We are talking about the foundation of human life. When that foundation is compromised, the damage is not repairable. You cannot rebuild a town's soul in the same way you can rebuild a bridge. The trauma becomes woven into the local identity, a shared scar that links generations to a moment when the world broke. In our deeper examination of these events, we see a recurring pattern. From the collapse of ancient dams to the modern industrial accidents that leave entire regions reeling, the narrative remains consistent. It is a story of human ambition outpacing human wisdom. We have the capability to build wonders, but we often lack the wisdom to know when to stop or when to listen to the warnings inherent in the land itself. The earth is not silent. It speaks through the shifting of rock and the rising of the water. We have simply become very good at turning down the volume until the point of no return. As we conclude this exploration, take a moment to consider the spaces around you. Look at the structures that sustain your daily life and ask if there is a history behind them that has been buried to keep the narrative of progress intact. There is always a deeper story, a layer of truth that lies beneath the official reports and the polished press releases. By seeking these truths, we honor the memory of those who were silenced by the hubris of their time. We ensure that their stories serve a purpose, acting as a warning light for those who follow. Thank you for joining us in this investigation. Your curiosity is the light that illuminates the shadows, and together, we continue to uncover the truths that history would prefer to leave in the dark. Stay alert, stay questioning, and we will see you on our next journey into the heart of the unknown.